Think about Emily. She's a seasoned professional. She's been working for a company for the last 2 decades. She got into a fight with her boss, and he decides he's going to fire her, which is perfectly acceptable according to Canadian employment law. However, he has to offer severance and reasonable notice of termination. So he comes up with a very unattractive package. She's a smart lady, and she's like, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to court. Okay. A few weeks later, she goes to court, and she feels confident that AI can help. So she goes to Copilot and decides to generate her court submission and asks if Copilot can generate a bunch of case law to support her argument. Eventually, she goes to court, submit her claims. She's pretty confident, but a few weeks later, she gets invited to a hearing, and the judge is not very happy about it because 9 out of 10 cases are fabricated. So problem is that it's been happening quite frequently over the last few years, and in fact, a few months ago, a couple in BC, I think they were in the middle of a tenant-landlord dispute, something like that. Anyway, 9 out of 10 cases were hallucinated. So, but interestingly, a lot of lawyers also get in trouble. In New York, in Ontario, in BC, in Australia, and some of them might be disbarred because they've been generating a lot of court documents and citing fake cases. Side joke, I think a lot of lawyers have been hallucinating cases, not using AI. That's not a new problem. It's just they were never caught, and it was not as problematic as it used to be. Anyway, bottom line is that if lawyers get caught and they make that mistakes, obviously a lot of unrepresented litigants are going to make that mistake. And that's a huge problem for courts because we thought a few years ago, wow, that's amazing. I mean, AI can generate contracts, it can generate court documents, but that's if you're creating a lot of low quality document, very long, very eloquent, very sexy, but then you're adding more work to the courts, which are already quite overwhelmed. So you're basically adding more barriers to justice. And that's what ChatGPT is doing and many of the other AIs. So the key question for us, researchers, lawyers, computer scientists, technologists, as some people call us, is what do we do about this? Do we build something better? Is it even possible? Justice and technology are at a crossroads. On the one side, on the one hand, access to justice is a real problem in Canada, in the US, in Europe. There's a lot of evidence on that. Okay. Did you know that in 50% of Canadian court cases, at least one of the parties is not represented by a lawyer? And that's the problem with Emily. She's not rich, she's not poor. And because of that legal gray zone, she does not qualify for legal aid. And that's the case for everyone, pretty much. The middle class, all of us. Even I can't afford myself if I went back to practice. So what do you do about this? Is that even acceptable in 2025? So there's a bit of a question here. So something needs to be done. And people are going to be using Google and GPT because that's what is available. But the question is, can we do something a little bit better with that? So AI can draft, can do a lot of very cool things. Even you may have heard that GPT-4 passed the bar. It did, and it scored in the top 10%. Okay, so a few months ago, that claim was questioned, and a lot of these statements, a lot of these conclusions were kind of debunked. Okay, so that's important to think about it. But even let's say that's true, that's an accurate statement. These are accurate findings. Taking the bar is a bit of a different thing than being a lawyer. There are a lot of different things, that involve being a lawyer, lawyering skills, and you could argue that, that says maybe a lot about the bar exam. Maybe we should rethink how we test our young training. I see some of my former students here. Shouldn't say that. With that said, so legal professionals are skeptical, and they're right to be. But there's a lot of investment in AI. The Stanford AI Index report published a few months ago that AI investment in 2023, from 2023 went from $3 billion to $25 billion in 2025. It's obviously not everything, that's not all going in law and compliance, but a lot of it is going in law. So what are we doing here? Are we building technology that's not really helping, even actually can do harm, and we're pouring a lot of money into it? So the question for us is, can we do better? Can we refine the way AI is being designed? And there are a lot of ideas, we've tried, let's add some data and connect legal data to language model. Let's build our own language model. We did that, but unfortunately, it didn't work so much. So recently, we came up with a new project called OpenJustice. And think about it as an AI creation platform. Imagine if you're a legal professional and you can build your own AI in plain language. Just that's it. You write code, you think, you explain how the system has to think, you ingest the knowledge, and then it learns from you, but not from the knowledge from your experience. So it started as a community in 2021 and evolved into a system where you can build reasoning and you can open the hood. So let's think about Alex, a lawyer that wants to represent Emily. And he's an experienced lawyer and has, some cases, a couple of cases under his belt, but he wants to go further. He doesn't want to end up like Emily and using ChatGPT, but so he wants to use something that's designed for law. There's OpenJustice, but there are many others, but he wants to push it further. So first step, it's going to identify the problem. I want to be negotiating a good wrongful termination package for my client. Okay, so how do I go about it? Okay, so then what happens is OpenJustice opens the hood and allows Alex to refine the system and maybe choose one of the mainstream language models like GPT, Claude, or other, even our model. But then what's important is that on top of this, he has to be doing something about it. So what OpenJustice does is that it's allowing him to upload data. So for example, court materials, even personal notes from past mediations and negotiations. And it will be connected eventually to any language model. So, but what's more important here, you see, is not only adding data. What we've been doing in the legal industry and in many other industries, we think, okay, but ChatGPT doesn't know anything about law because it's trained on the entire internet, but the internet is 90% garbage, so that's why it doesn't work. If we sprinkle a bit of data that are medical or law, it's going to suddenly become smart. But that's not the reality of it. The reality requires a lot of work. We need to have experts, so bankers, doctors, lawyers, getting involved into the operating system. That's a very exciting idea. That means you don't need to be a computer scientist to code, because you can do it. There's a lot of natural language interface, and a lot of people like us are working on what we call conversion algorithms, basically helping you to write in English or French or any other languages and build something. So now, and then it gets translated into a platform like this one. So for example, Alex now deploys his AI. Let's say he built something in the area of wrongful dismissal, and then he got to test it, and he compares how ChatGPT performs, and you may see that there's a massive difference. But the reality of it is it's not necessarily superior. It's not necessarily better. But what's important here is control, is guardrails. I've been in this space for 10 years, and we've been talking about AI ethics and guardrails, but the problem is that computer scientists are building guardrails, but then don't know what is a good guardrail in law. So we need to have professionals, people who have expertise in the area, to get involved, and it has to be beyond prompting. Prompting is cute, is nice, but it's very much based on consumer analytics. Consumer analytics is pretty much like, Amazon knows that you like something, but it's binary. AI in law, AI in medicine is much more complex. There's a lot of reasoning, so we need to open up the system to allow professionals to get involved and get their hands dirty and work on how the system really operates. Okay, so that's kind of cute. That's an interesting platform. But the question is, how do we take it to the next step? Okay, we're a bunch of researchers, so that's a very, very basic interface. So now the idea for us is, how do we help professionals to take it to the next step and to deploy that kind of system into the everyday workflow? So in courts, we work with courts, law firms, pro bono organizations, and we realized that a lot of them actually need very different things. So, for example, legal aid organizations like Pro Bono Ontario, they receive 1,000 phone calls every week. They can't use a chatbot. That's too much. Like they're not going to be finding that very useful. So you need to rethink the way these products are deployed. So for example, how do they go about it? We're building a speech-to-text recognition system that processes all the calls. Then OpenJustice API organizes the request based on those that have already been answered, new questions, complex questions, urgent questions, and it creates a to-do list of how you should go about it next. But here, so the idea is not only to dump legal knowledge, it's to help to create a collective legal intelligence where a community can make contribution and organizations can build on their internal and previous experience. The reality of law, for those of you who practice law, is like 90% of cases are decided through settlement. So a lot of organizations are sitting on a lot of internal data, and that's what matters the most. Like if you're a transactional lawyer, if you're an employment lawyer, what matters is your experience. Yes, the knowledge is key, and there are already plenty of tools like Canly and a lot of open access platforms are there with a lot of raw knowledge. What's missing, and that's also missing for our students, is the experience that can be integrated into that system, and especially for those students who don't have access to the classic mentorship avenues, they need to be able to access that knowledge. Okay. So now the question is, why this matters so much to us? I think I want to go back to this example of people using GPT to go to court. This is going to be growing at an incredible pace. I mean, there are some studies already showing that by 2030, 90% of the internet will be AI generated. So the problem is that how do we expect courts to be dealing with that? It's impossible. So they need another AI tool to screen AI generated. Yes, I know that's a crazy idea, but that's the reality of it. And if no one does it, I mean, that's going to be coming from open source initiative. So what's very important to us is that it is open source. What does this mean? That means the community, so the legal community owns it. It's not accessible to non-lawyers because we're worried that they might be using it. It's not perfect, and it needs to be built. It needs to be developed by the community. I mean, it can be, the idea is almost like a little bit like a marketplace, an online forum. It's a little bit of how it started. And it can be shared with your peers. For example, that lawyer, he might find another lawyer in Kingston or Toronto that already worked on a similar problem, and they're willing to share their mediation or negotiation experience. I think that's a pretty cool idea. I mean, it doesn't have to be raw knowledge. It could be more subtle, and a platform like OpenJustice could distill the knowledge and remove confidential information to protect, obviously, the privacy of the clients and also the secret sauce of the lawyers, because after all, they don't have to share everything. I mean, their competitive advantage is based on their experience. So what we're trying to do is a little bit more than building an AI. There are plenty of great companies that are doing that. What we're trying to do is, as a legal tech community, but what's really exciting for us is a legal tech community that's made of both computer scientists and practitioners and lawyers. So we've got about 20,000 queries per month. About 500 experts are registered and making daily contributions. We've got very random projects. People in Nairobi building contract law models, in Nigerian law. We've got people in Australia working on various projects. It's pretty much an open project. Anybody can contribute. We've got some guardrails, obviously. So, but this idea is very exciting. It's probably one of the most exciting projects I've ever worked on. I mean, this idea that you can build technology without coding. I think that's probably a very interesting project, but very hard and very challenging. It's never been done in the past. There are plenty of tech communities. I mean, there's Hugging Face, there's Red. I mean, there's tons of this. And a lot of organizations. I mean, DeepSeek you may have heard of it. It's partially open source. But having lawyers or professionals that are not in the tech world to make a contribution, first, the technology was not there. This idea of conversion algorithms, turning natural language into AI, that was insane 3 years ago. But also maybe because people thought lawyers couldn't do it. I mean, lawyers were known for sharp writing skills, analytical skills, and also we like to argue, we like to fight. Okay, so maybe we're not really the best people to build stuff. Okay, but I think we can change that norm. We've been working, I mean, a lot of my students, so here, former students, we've been building things together with computer scientists, and there is a way to challenge that norm. So now you can argue, okay, so now the question for us is, why do I need the Queen's community? I mean, I think we are very excited to work with Queen's grad, not only Queen's grad, we work with everyone that's interested in making a contribution. And the idea is really to help us to build that shared knowledge, and I would even push this idea further, that shared experience, trying to build the experience into a shared machine that will be available to the community. So it's a growing movement. It's still small, it's still modest, and I wanted to share this experience with you because I think Queen's has been an amazing home to work on that project, the students both having a great computer science school, one of the top in the country, as well as having a great law school. I'm not saying this because my dean is here, but it's been a wonderful, and I'd love to engage more with the Queen's community. A lot of our projects are with former Queen's grad, both law firms, Pro Bono Ontario, and this is really an interesting experience to bridge that gap between research and practice. Thank you very much.